On the night before Thanksgiving, 1971, a man in a business suit handed a flight attendant a note. She thought at first that a lonely passenger had slipped her his phone number. She tucked it into her pocket without reading it. He leaned toward her, calm and polite, and told her she'd better take a look. Inside the briefcase on his lap was a tangle of wires and red sticks. The note said he had a bomb. A few hours later, that same man lowered the rear staircase of a jet in flight, stepped out into a freezing storm thousands of feet above the forests of Washington state, and vanished, with $200,000 strapped to his body. He was never seen again. Not that night, not in the more than 50 years since. And here is what makes this case so strange. He wasn't a ghost. He left things behind. His tie, his cigarette butts, a note written in his own hand, even the recorded serial number of every single bill he took. He gave investigators more to work with than most criminals ever do. And it led nowhere. We still don't know his name. We don't even know if he lived or died. This is the only unsolved skyjacking in American history. The story of the man the world calls D.B. Cooper, a name that, as you'll see, isn't even his. On the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, a man walked up to the Northwest Orient counter in Portland, Oregon, and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. He gave the name Dan Cooper. Everything about him was unremarkable. A middle-aged man in a dark suit, white shirt, black tie. He ordered a bourbon and soda and sat quietly near the back of the plane. Witnesses would later struggle to describe him at all because there was nothing to describe. He was the most ordinary man in the world. Then he passed the note to the flight attendant, and when she sat down beside him, as the note asked, he opened the briefcase just enough for her to see the wires and the red cylinders inside. He was never loud, never cruel. He spoke softly, almost courteously, and he seemed to know exactly what he was doing. What he asked for proved it. He wanted $200,000 in $20 bills and 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve. The specifics mattered. Asking for 4 parachutes suggested he might force someone to jump with him, which meant the authorities couldn't risk handing him sabotaged equipment. He'd thought it through. This was not a man improvising. The plane landed in Seattle. The airline, insured against exactly this, paid the ransom and, quietly, recorded the serial number of every bill onto microfilm first. The 36 passengers were allowed off the plane, most of them never realizing anything had been wrong. The money and the parachutes were brought aboard. The note itself, the physical note in his handwriting, he asked for back, and he got it. It has never been recovered. Then he told the crew to take off again, destination Mexico City. He gave precise instructions for the flight. Fly low, no higher than 10,000 feet. Fly slow, landing gear down, flaps down, cabin unpressurized, and leave the rear staircase, the aft air stair, unlocked. Everything about those instructions told investigators the same thing. This was a man who understood aircraft and who intended to jump. Somewhere over the dark, wooded ridges of southwest Washington, in the middle of a rainstorm at around 8 o'clock at night, a warning light flickered on the cockpit panel. The rear stairway had been lowered. When the plane finally landed, the staircase was hanging open, and the man was gone. He had stepped into freezing rain, into wilderness, in the dark, wearing a business suit and slip-on shoes, with a parachute he couldn't steer, and a fortune tied to his waist. That is where the trail ends, and where the mystery begins. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in American history. Search planes, ground teams, miles of forest combed on foot. they found nothing. No body, no parachute, no money. Not a single confirmed trace of the man who had been on that plane hours before. The FBI had to consider the obvious possibility that he hadn't survived at all. The jump was close to suicidal. Freezing temperatures, a storm, rough terrain, darkness, no proper gear, and a parachute that couldn't be guided. The agent who led the case for decades believed Cooper died that night in the woods. But a man who dies still leaves something behind: a body, bones, a scrap of a parachute, something. For 9 years, there was nothing. And then a little boy, digging in the sand by a river, found the first piece of the puzzle to surface in almost a decade. In 1980, an 8-year-old boy was building a campfire on a beach along the Columbia River when he uncovered several bundles of disintegrating $20 bills, around $5,800 in all. The serial numbers matched. This was Cooper's ransom. After 9 years of silence, the money had come back. It should have been a breakthrough. Instead, it made everything harder. The cash was found miles from where the FBI had calculated Cooper jumped. It was buried in river sediment in a way that didn't fit a man simply walking out of the forest with a bag of cash. Had the money washed downriver, been moved by dredging, been placed there deliberately? Every explanation raised new problems, and none of them fit cleanly. And that was it. That small, rotted bundle of bills is the only physical trace of the ransom ever found. The other $190,000 has never surfaced. Not one marked bill has ever turned up anywhere in over 50 years. The single clue that returned didn't answer the question. It broke it open wider. For 45 years, the FBI chased him. They investigated more than 800 suspects: paratroopers, pilots, ex-soldiers, con men, drifters. Men who resembled the sketch. Men who confessed on their deathbeds. Men whose own families turned them in. Not one has ever been proven to be Cooper. Every lead has ended the same way, in a maybe and then a dead end. Even his famous name is a mistake. He never called himself D.B. Cooper. He said his name was Dan Cooper. In the chaos of the early reporting, a journalist confused him with an unrelated man who had briefly been questioned. And the wrong name, D.B. Cooper, went out to the world and stuck forever. The press named a man that no one could ever find. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially suspended the investigation. The case remains the only unsolved act of air piracy in the history of commercial aviation. But the strangest part of this case isn't that we can't put a name to him. It's that he left so much behind and still slipped through our fingers completely. He left his clip-on tie on that seat. He left cigarette butts in the ashtray. He left a note in his own handwriting. The bank had the serial number of every bill. By the standards of an unsolved case, that is an extraordinary amount of evidence. And after more than half a century, all of it together has not been enough to tell us who he was. Two possibilities remain, and both are unsettling in their own way. If he died in that forest, then somewhere out there for over 50 years has been a man and a fortune the earth has simply refused to give back, and no one can explain how his money ended up buried on a distant riverbank. If he lived, then a middle-aged man in a business suit stepped out of an airplane into a storm, pulled off the only unsolved skyjacking in history, and walked quietly back into ordinary life, sitting perhaps at some family dinner table for decades, saying nothing until the day he died. Either way, a man fell into the dark and became a ghost story, one that quietly changed the life of everyone who has flown since. The security lines, the screening, the locked cockpit doors all trace back, in part, to him. His truest legacy isn't the money, it's the airport. So what do you think?
Did Cooper die in that Washington forest, or did he survive the jump and disappear into an ordinary life? And if he lived, who was he? Tell me your theory in the comments. I read every one. And if you want more cases the official record never closed, subscribe to the Unsolved Echoes. New case every week. Until next time, stay curious.